Hello, everyone, and welcome to our B2B practitioners video session. Today, I have with me Anjali Mullins, founder and CEO of Ethereus Ventures. She has held multiple C-level positions at companies like Amazon, GoDaddy, and Resourcify. She has scaled 7 companies, including 1 unicorn and 1 IPO. And now she's advising, mentoring, and investing in startups here in Berlin. And I have also Norman Rohr from, currently CEO at Finway. It's an operating system for finance for SMEs. And he's also obviously part of B2B practitioners. And today's session will be a reality check on AI. If you're opening LinkedIn these days, you have the feeling you're so behind because everyone is, automating SDRs, building their whole operating go-to-market engine with AI, building AI-generated campaigns, you name it. So the hype is real. And I actually wanted to talk to you both about, what does the reality look like? What are real use cases? What do you see in the market? Not what's the hype on LinkedIn? And so let's dive into it. So let's be honest, when we talk to Series A and B founders, and especially in DACH, what does AI in GTM look like inside those companies? So not the LinkedIn reality, but the actual reality. Maybe, Norman, you can start from your CEO perspective, maybe, then Anjali as an investor. What do you see when you look into those companies?
That's actually a good question. So a couple of years ago, when I would go to the Berlin startup meetups, there would be people generally talking how to apply AI, machine learning, and so on. Now, if you go to AI events, 95% are consultants that try to sell you something. So I would say there are some good grassroots efforts on the ground. And I get into this where I see what success criteria are going to get into it. I would say mostly, what happens is everyone talks about it, but few people do it. So it's more like, oh yeah, of course we use GTM. Sorry, we use ChatGPT or things like this, but it's not really, it's almost like everyone is doing something, but it's not really orchestrated. So you live in too many tools, all the tools rolling out something, you believe you're doing AI, but it doesn't move into the right direction. So what I say, what the most people do, there's probably AI generated content. There's probably some sort of Clay Apollo based outreach involved because that's the easiest and we all suffer from it. I'm getting between 20 and 50 in-mails every week. I think that's burning the customer base, but it still creates visibility. So a lot of people still do it. It's the earliest and the initial thing to do. If I zoom out to basically look at it, I would say I think it's the builders that are the most successful. So you have those, and when you have a couple of people that are motivated or just one single person that actually can build something and pull everyone into that direction, that's what I would say, but it's not really orchestrated. And I make a point here because I want to elaborate on this later.
Anjali, what do you see when you look into the companies you advise and invest in?
It's really interesting. So I had some meetings with, I would say, early stage investors, and they were looking at pre-seed, seed, and Series A companies, and the mood has definitely shifted in what they're looking for. Now they don't want to invest at those stages in companies that have more than 5 people. And this is a real thing. So one of the realities we're seeing at early stage companies, at least, is doing a lot more with less. And from the investor side, there's a lot of downward pressure on founders and CEOs to do more with less. I think on the operator side, what we're seeing is there's a disparity. I would say, and just to make it rough estimates, 50% of the companies out there are really using AI tools and agents and workflows, and they're really getting in it, all the tools. And then there's the other 50% of the companies on the operator side that they're really struggling. You find that the senior leadership is not investing in training the employees and team members with the AI skills. And I think the thing that we've seen is that the tides change in the AI landscape very quickly. So in 2025, it was all OpenAI and ChatGPT. In 2026, now it's all Claude and Claude Code. Who knows what 2027 will bring, but big disparity.
Yeah,
it's an excellent point, Angela, that you said that I think if you're a small company, you have to do it. And then you have typically highly motivated people. It's more difficult when you have an existing organization and need to change some of the things. The other point that you touched on, which I think is quite important, is don't get lost in the tools. So yes, there has this trend being ChatGPT more on the consumer side, creating the initial awareness. And then there's now Anthropic and Co that are a lot more B2B focused. But I still see on the hacker side that people change tools every 3 or 6 months in your company, and you need some stability to actually see what is working. Yes, one day Cursor is ahead, the next day Codex is ahead. So you shouldn't change just because of a current better benchmark playing in your way. Have a strategy, what you want to build, and instill the culture of doing so.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say, it's a great point, Norman, is a tool is not a strategy. So for all the listeners of this episode, and if you're a founder or CEO or even a leader out there, especially an AI tool is not a strategy. It's not that you just dropped Claude, in your company or NAN or any of these tools and automatically, things get better. A strategy is a strategy and leadership is leadership. And I think that we can't forget those things.
That's what I'm seeing as well, is basically giving Lendoc, and Lendoc has all the models, right? And then give it to the people and they will figure it out. So that's the one thing that I'm seeing a lot. So in DACH particularly, do you think we are especially behind here? So if you look at US focused company, but also UK or Nordics, is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, are they very behind on this whole adoption curve?
The big question. I just wrote an article for the Next Web called The Revenue Gap. And the subtitle of the article was What EU Founders Are Afraid to Risk and US Founders Are Afraid to Question. And this is true, right? There's no right or wrong way. But the one thing that I've learned being an expat and being in the DACH region is there's a lot of founders and CEOs here that are afraid of taking on the risk, and they wait too long to take a decision. And the one thing I will also say is not making a decision is still a decision. So this is the biggest hurdle. It's not adopting a particular tool. It is the inability to make a decision, take a risk. And I particularly find this to be strong feedback for founders and CEOs in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland.
I would say yes, particularly US or also in Asia, a lot of the companies are ahead of us. There's definitely the regulatory environment, but I don't think that is an issue for smaller companies because sometimes they're often not even aware. But I give a nice anecdote. You probably are aware of Google Workspace Studio, which is basically just an application of Gemini on the corporate infrastructure you have. So basically on your Google. But my DPO came to me and said, "Oh, now we have to evaluate whether you're actually allowed to use this tool." And I said, "I have approval for Gemini, I have approval for Google Workspace. What's the issue?" Now it's a new use case. We need to analyze this. And I was okay, what about Slack, Asana, Notion, whatever? All of them rolled out AI tools. Some of them are even more aggressive or possessive than what Gemini does. If I look at Rovo or Slack or whatever, they have access to everything. And I think there is definitely, because we are so used to regulation, we rely on that holds us back. That said, I have a story from the US where my head of engineering is currently looking into how to move faster and how to move towards agentic AI. He talked to a couple of US companies that described how they had gotten to builders and they managed to quadruple their output and everything, what the costs were. Wind forward a couple of days, they had a security incident. So I think there is a balance between the two things, how to apply, but by all means, I think get into the doing mode. Secure the small wins. Don't be too passive, too reactive, because you're going to get lost. I think if I look back at the past couple of years, it was always, okay, AI performance improves 2x every 6 months. That's 4x a year. That's 10x every 2 years. But by now, I think the tools are at a level of maturity where you should definitely build, where it doesn't matter anymore. You don't have this. It wasn't a first mover advantage. It was a first mover disadvantage because you built something that would be outdated. Almost a year later, by now, I think there's stability. You can easily switch the tools. That's probably one of the biggest takeaways. Build your infrastructure independent of the tools so that you can switch.
What do you think are founders underestimating how fast this is moving? Or is it is the hype ahead of reality?
I think founders are absolutely underestimating how fast things move. We're in an age where if a founder or CEO has a product idea, this product idea can be deployed in a week, a month, something that would have taken a year or more to deploy. And we can no longer depend on product features to save us. Because when you're in an era where building, deploying, and upgrading product features, the time collapses, the price collapses. How do then these companies differentiate themselves? And like Norman said, have the first mover advantage. And so I think a lot of founders, and I don't think this is just a DACH thing. This is a worldwide, this is a universal thing. But I think founders in general are completely underestimating the time, the shift, how fast things are moving.
Yeah, there's probably two groups, right? The companies that are being built right now, they obviously are already building AI first, or most of them, right? And the ones that have been around in the market, I mean, some proclaim the apocalypse, that SaaS is dying and so on. So the companies that have been around, the SaaS companies for 5 to 10 years and have to shift now, right? I think those are the two different groups as well. So what do you see maybe with a bit later stage companies, right? So Series B, C, what do you see? What are founders trying first when it comes to go to market? And yeah, what sticks?
It's just really interesting. And it's not just Series B and C, but it's, even much later stage. I think in the first wave last year, they tried to lay a bunch of people off claiming that AI tools would do the job. And you saw the Duolingo and the Klarna and those situations. And then they ended up hiring people back because they didn't know how to implement things properly and didn't understand the differences between what you really need humans and human expertise and the experience for, and then what could actually AI tools use for you. So now it's causing Series B and C companies to recalibrate what's important. One of the interesting things that I find is large cap companies are starting to put their money behind this storytelling concept. They're starting to hire heads of storytelling. This is a role which is in an AI world. You're like, why are you hiring this head of storytelling role? I saw Miro, they were hiring it. I don't know if it's still. So for the listeners, I think it was in Amsterdam, New York, a couple of different cities, and Vanta. So these are much bigger companies, but they're putting their money behind this, and one has to ask the question why. And I think it's because from a go-to-market perspective, if everyone's using Quad or a different tool for their content, if everyone's using Clay, Reach, whatever other tools, right, for their outbound and their prospecting, what now becomes a differentiation? And this is starting to become storytelling. So I think it's quite interesting because we're kind of coming back to basic principles and seeing what differentiates ourselves. But these are just some of the, I think, very unique things that I'm starting to see.
What are you actually implementing first in go-to-market?
I have to say I'm a big fan of embedded AI. So I always, maybe to zooming out a bit, what's the difference? When do I believe that AI projects are failing? That's when a CEO sits down and says, oh, we need to do something AI. That's the typical approach in the Mittelstand or whatever. And then they'd say, Norman, you're now in charge. And then the first question they ask is, well, should we roll out ChatGPT or should we roll out whatever? And all they look for is for a flagship project that will take a lot of resources, a long time, and nothing is going to come out of it. So that's why I actually favor embedded AI, where you try to rethink the existing processes and make them better step by step. And people just know already, oh, this process has to go through. Oh, now it's easier. That's probably how I'm looking at. But if I look at some of the things that I'm seeing, that I'm observing, that already use cases that exist, obviously everyone is doing this outreach, AI-driven outreach. I think key there is, in my opinion, to have the right data. And again, it's not tool-driven. Angela, I completely agree with you. It needs to be culture and mission-driven. Tell the people, or I call it the use case, basically understand the use case, the value, and then try to optimize it. Instead of saying, here's a number of tools, but everyone is doing it. It's working reasonably fine. So you get a lot more, it's a lot more productive than outbound calling, but the lead quality has yet to show that it actually converts. So I think you get to this meeting or demo stage relatively quickly. What's happening afterwards? I also have the hypothesis unproven, you will have to reiterate quite often because there's a much shorter half-life to it. So it might mean after every 3 or 6 months, almost like in social media, you have to switch your approach, and people who come later will actually not reap any advantages anymore. So there's a clear first mover advantage because we are all getting overload from it and people get immunized to this. The second thing I would say that builds on it is actually leverage signals that you find. So I had an interesting conversation last week in a roundtable with other revenue leaders here in Munich, and people showed all sides of signals. Yes, there's the ones that you can harvest, but one of them actually connected to their clients on WhatsApp and saw their status messages. So basically use this as a signal to pick them up at the right point. So I think there's all sorts of things that you can do. And I think signal-based is the most important to actually improve the performance of your sequences. I already alluded to content creation, but when you say content creation, let's not just think, oh, I work with Jasper, Rightly, or whatever it is, and please write something, or ChatGPT. A lot of people use ChatGPT. No, think about it. Can it monitor what the discussion of the day is? Can it give you a suggestion how you, with your perspective, a company's perspective, would answer, make you suggestions, you can edit. It pushes it out, it augments the conversation and helps maybe produce an own piece. So I think it's more like optimizing the entire workflow. I had yesterday an interesting conversation with Moritz from Pencilla, and he basically completely automated the content creation process where I used to be a professional content manager. So a very good example of how to save resources, but still have similar output or even more relevant output. Just trying to look. I think one of the most important functions, I talked about having the right data for outbound calls. Even more important is actually CRM, the data that you have in the CRMs if you want to do lead nurturing or if you want to market to your existing customers. CRMs, I would say, are mostly in really bad disorder. If you have bad data, AI will only learn from bad data. It will not miraculously know what is the correct data, what is the correct approach. In fact, it will actually amplify the bad quality data that you have in your system and basically throw it out in a megaphone. So I think one of the really good applications that I've seen is try to use bots to clean up, validate your CRM data, make it better, make it consistent throughout all this legacy stuff. I know companies where there are still hundreds or thousands of leads from 5 years ago. No one even knows whether they still are valid, whether they are still targets. The strategy has changed in between 5 times. Do your homework before you leverage this data.
And you can actually use AI to clean up your CRM. So we already jumped into the use cases. Anjali, do you have other use cases that you see at companies?
Yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit more, maybe from, the marketing side and positioning. So I see a lot of companies just trying to use AI to tell them what to write. And this doesn't matter what tool. I don't care if it's Claude, ChatGPT, Jasper, which I love Jasper, but still I'm finding this discrepancy now. And that's why you're seeing on social platforms, a lot of the content become the same. I think Norman made a good point, like what's actually being talked about for the day. So people are forgetting social listening tools and social listening in general. But I think going back to just the go-to-market plan and the marketing piece, people are over relying on AI tools to tell them what to write instead of using their critical thinking to understand how to connect to their clients. This is the basis and the foundation of any good go-to-market strategy that actually can help you scale. And I feel like, especially in the early stages, or if you're a Series and C company and you're trying to accelerate, they just think pack on more tools, it'll just do more for us. And they're missing this critical step. So I know it sounds very simple, but it's quite interesting how the most simple things are the ones that we forget to do.
Yeah, totally.
Angela,
I mean,
think you
I
mentioned
fell into this trap as well. When I have to write something on LinkedIn, I'm also like, suggest to me a few topics. Now, actually, I have a LinkedIn AI research assistant now that suggests topics. But like the brand narrative as well, right? That is something you cannot automate. You actually have to think for yourself.
mentioned a really important aspect. If everything can be automated, and we all use the same automation tools, What matters is actually even more the strategic foundation. And I see a lot of companies, they haven't understood their ICP, they haven't understood their value proposition, they haven't clarified the positioning, or at least when it's a younger company, their hypothesis, and they just run through the process and they say it doesn't work, and then they move on to the next automation tool, rather than really thinking on spending a lot of time clarifying what they stand for and why the customer should buy them. And then obviously it doesn't, I think there's a bit of a conflict. You probably know this, Angela, from investors. If you're a small company, even I'm in a bit in this, oh, we need more leads. But before you have the leads, you actually need to know, are those the right leads? Can you deliver on it? Can you make them happy?
And are they the right ones? Like you said, Norman, are they ICP? And I think a lot of founders at the early stages are under pressure to get revenue. And I call it basically the chart of death. So you spend a bunch of money, you try to drive traffic, you realize they're not the right ICP or just not the right leads for you. Then you stop all spending, but you don't do the actual work that you need to do. And then there's more pressure and you just try to pump more money in the funnel. And so it's a very interesting roller coaster ride that's not the most fun to do.
Yeah. Actually, the funny thing is, what I'm doing for B2B practitioners right now is actually building sort of our brain on Claude, right? So, and for that, you have to know your ICP, you have to know your personas, the pain points, and so on. So, in order to actually, for AI to also understand your business, you first need to do that foundational work. Then you can upload it to Claude or whatever tool, and then it might generate better results, right, than the typical generic AI slop that we see. All right, what is maybe the use case that is most oversold right now? What do you see?
That there's a GTM playbook on LinkedIn and comment playbook to download and it will magically solve all your problems. I think this is probably the single most overplayed thing. There are so many people out there, especially in LinkedIn, hawking their, tool systems. I myself, I'll talk about my favorite tools, but I think everyone knows that the tool stack is something that is very bespoke and it is very specific to the needs. And I think a lot of people out there are trying to find the shortcut instead of understanding the basics and just going back to what we said before, the tool is not the strategy.
Yeah, totally. So maybe what does it take to be actually successful in this? So if a founder comes to you, Norm, and says, I want to build an AI-enabled GTM motion, what do you tell them? So what do they need before?
Yeah, it's good. So I think there are two ways. So as a marketer, I see, and it's probably a bit self-serving because my expertise is strategic product marketing. I believe it's really, you need to have the product marketing fundamentals in place. So you need to know your ICP, you need to know the buyer center, you need to know the value proposition. You need to have your positioning clear. If you can't convey this and put it into the right words, any outreach will not work. Going back to what Angela said at the beginning, I think there's another aspect of enablement. It's literally culture, mission, vision to basically pull everyone together. Don't tell people, get this tool and make it work or build this. Let's really tell them, work holistically on a topic. So I, as an example right now, at Finway, I basically nominated 2 people, talked to everyone else, what are the use cases that we can actually make happen. Yes, it will cost me 1 or 2 weeks, but it's definitely worth, instead of having everyone working on islands that aren't disconnected, where you don't really get the value holistically, but only marginally in some areas. I think that's probably the biggest thing. The other thing that I would say is, once you go down the road and get a person that is passionate and has the capabilities. I think passion right now is more important because it's reasonably quick to understand the tools, but you need someone who can bridge the gap between the use case and the technique and make it happen. So that's why I would say in a go-to-market space, I think you need something, however you want to call it, AI marketing, AI engineer or whatever, but don't let them run alone. You need still someone who is able to strategize, get him the Angela and work together with an engineer to actually realize, and then step by step, measure by measure.
From your perspective, Anjali, what's maybe also most common failures that do you see when companies try to implement AI and GTM?
There's this new org chart that's coming around, the AI agent org chart. And whether it's marketing or sales or CS, They're looking at GTM engineers, they're looking on the marketing side, content engineers, and they want to manage a bunch of AI agents. So this kind of goes to the point that Norman mentioned, where you need to put people in place that have enough experience to know what they're doing, to be able to understand how to manage the agents and then work with other team members to make the AI tools successful. It is not just the implementation of it. This is very poignant for very early stage founders, because what I see them doing is they're hiring very junior people that don't have the experience, throwing AI tools at them, expecting them to become the GTM engineer, the AI strategist, etc., and it's failing.
So this is the thing that is just the one mistake, especially in early stage companies, that they can absolutely fix. So this experience, and I think this is something we're going to see probably until 2030 over the next 4 years. People who have the experience to be able to challenge hallucinations in the AI, challenge even the outputs that AI is giving us, these people are going to become so important. And I'm actually worried for the cohort. I think it's at Gen Z. I'm worried for this cohort that is either entering the workforce or is at the very beginning stages of their careers because they don't have the full-fledged experience. It's going to be even more interesting for the Gen Alpha, so the children right now coming up, because I think it's going to be even more impactful for them.
So what is maybe the minimum viable starting point when companies, so for a Series A, Norman mentioned already, take a process and go through it and see where AI can make it, easier, faster? What would you say, Anjali?
So if I was an early stage founder, the first thing I would do is actually map out my belief statement. What do you actually believe? Why? People buy beliefs and recognition over just a product statement. Do that first. Put your brand and your positioning together second. Third, understand your ICP, which goes hand in hand, right, with your positioning. Then after you've done that, start to do just, and this is very old school, start to do those introductory calls to understand just the first pieces of product market fit. Notice that all the things I just said had nothing to do with AI. And this is what people are missing. This is the big mistake. They just think a tool is going to solve it. So do those things first. Then the first AI tools are dependent on how you acquire clients. So for example, if you're acquiring them outbound, you're going to be using different tools than if you're acquiring them inbound or via partnerships, affiliate referrals. Then you start to build your AI tool stack. Whilst you're building your AI tool stack, just for the founders to keep in mind, you still need someone who is very experienced to manage the AI tool stack. So this is the other area that founders make a mistake. They throw a junior person with an AI tool stack together and expect huge revenue.
Yeah. And probably also ask ChatGPT or Claude what are the pain points of my customers instead of talking to them. That's probably another one. Classic one. So maybe also or maybe Norm, you want to add something?
I think Angela covered the most important. So I would have said, clarify your strategy, clarify your go-to-market. It's also different just by the fact if you go for enterprise, mid-market, or SME, you will have completely different stack. But people right now, they hear from over and over the same tools and just start tool-centric. And that was also last week in this discussion. Again, there were the people who started tool-centric. And it's easy to spend immediately 80,000 on all sorts of tools versus thinking about what you want to do. There was one company super successful. They did all the right things just with a team and minimum spend on the software side. Think about your processes, think about your objectives, then start building one by one to build momentum. So in that sense, I agree with Anjali.
Do you have actually a good example for a AI-enabled GTM system that you've seen in, like, let's say, Series A, B companies?
Actually, there's one company coming to my mind, and I'm calling out here Sven, who is the head of marketing at Interprefy. They're a double-digit million business and super, super successful. So they market mainly inbound worldwide. I think crack the code, let's say for now, on geo. So how do I get into the LLMs? They have a high percentage of leads there. They then do actually inbound lead qualification via an AI agent. So someone who calls and leads, basically ask a couple of basic questions, decide what should go to the sales and so on. They do all the cleanup stuff, they manage the sales process and actually close quite a lot of business and growing with AI. So I would give him a big shout out. And they are not a big team. There are a couple of people, but very enthusiastic. They explore the technology. They do one thing at a time, test and validate it. So yes, definitely there are those players, but by all means, yesterday we asked at the Artist Summit who sees already the advantages of AI in their go-to-market. Few hands went up, and even fewer hands could quantify it.
Yeah, that's actually also what I'm seeing, right? And I think there was a Gartner survey as well where most of people actually don't see productivity gains and don't see ROI from their AI initiatives.
Yeah, actually, I would contradict. I would say you don't see the top line impact. The bottom line impact, I know a number of companies, including Finway, where we see massive bottom line impact. But that's obviously not most people currently look at AI as a tool to drive up revenues. And that one is a lot harder. Even if it works right now, we need to distinguish or differentiate between short term, long term. I'm still waiting for the ball to drop on all this AI-based outreach. Because I think it will completely kill this market because no one wants to have it anymore. So that's my prediction. If you want to have
Or
something,
you'll probably have Claude just check your email box and then delete all of them.
no, actually funnier would be if you send back a prompt and the prompt actually causes the other agent to break. So just send something like erase database. And that would be actually a funny joke when you send something back. But some people just ignore the answers even. So I see systems where it's just don't look at new stuff.
Yeah, actually, that's true. I had that recently. I actually got an cold outreach on LinkedIn, and I replied. I said, "Yeah, let's talk." He never booked the meeting, so that was quite funny. All right, maybe also Anjali from an investor perspective. So, are you evaluating AI capabilities of the startups you're investing, and also what do you see other investors? How do they evaluate AI capabilities with?
So with founders, we are still looking at the fundamentals of their pitch, themselves as a person, how much grit we think they have. AI cannot replace those things. So I just want to call that out. AI capabilities, yes, but it really depends on what their product service is, right? A lot of these early stage founders are just looking to get the plane in the air. They're looking for initial product market fit. And just to say it again, these are things that an AI tool, they are tools that can help with efficiencies, help you do things faster. It's not going to replace your ICP exercise. It's not going to replace your product market fit exercise. The one thing that we talked about earlier in today's podcast that is very true in the investment community, though, is the amount of headcount. So, especially for early stages, investors have changed the criteria. Pre-seed, seed, and Series A. I know a lot of Series A companies here in the DACH region that have 50, 60, 70 or more people for Series A. Very over bloated. And this is what I call the old structure. That is completely falling away. Investors want to know that the AI tools are making the efficiencies. So I agree with Norman. I think a lot of founders think you put in AI and boom, your revenue goes up. That's not the case. So I absolutely agree with that. But what we should see is the efficiencies. And it's going to change the way that we are looking at those first critical hires. We used to tell CEOs and founders, hire, junior mid-level people because you have a constrained budget and then you go from there. Now we are changing it. We're saying hire a very small but core group of extremely experienced people, enable them with those AI tools because they're going to know how to use it and what to use it for, and then scale from there. So it's more about the how we're doing it. The what remains the same. Investors want to invest in the next hot thing that gives a return. That has not changed.
I was actually the other day also asked by a CMO who was looking. She said, I need a demand gen manager for France, demand gen manager for DACH, a website lead. head of digital, yada yada yada, and I was like, okay, this is a big team. I think the company is Series B now, so but it's interesting. And then I'm also talking to like senior folks that say, oh, actually, I have a bunch of offers where I'm the first hire and the only hire probably, where I need to, steer the agents, which is also a kind of an interesting challenge. All right. So what's the difference maybe between a company that impresses you with their GTM AI story versus where it's all just, buzzwords and theater?
For me, it's a company where a founder and CEO can tell me very clearly what they believe. And this is very important because I will ask this question to a founder and they just default to their product. And my response is, that's not my question. What do you believe? Because you want people to align with that. And so it's no longer this product feature go to market that used to be in the last 5 to 10 years. It is more of a story and a vision because producing the product and the product features is a lot easier these days. So this is a bit of something different that I'm seeing.
And maybe, Norm, what from GTM practitioner's side, what does a company need to have in place so that, when an investor asks about GTM efficiency, they have actually a compelling answer?
I think a testable hypothesis. No one expects that you get everything right at the first run, but have a clear understanding of the customer need, of the problem you're solving, have an understanding whether the problem is big enough that the customer actually acts. And that's particularly difficult right now because particularly in Germany, in light of the economic situation, every company is looking at their dollars free or euros 3 times before they spend it and explain how you get to the next stage. So I think really hypothesis and make it credible that you can do it with the resources right now so that that's where the small team comes in place. I think Angela is right. This will change actually the job profile of a lot of people because previously seniority meant, you can lead a team. Nowadays, you might find yourself as the single person in a company and having to do everything and being in need of automating everything.
Yeah. And I think the folks that are very, very senior and are not open to the change will have a hard time, right? Finding a job as well.
It's
Cool.
like
So
for me.
now you're very hands-on, Norm. So now we've reached our rapid round. So maybe one answer each. The one AI in GTM use case that is most underrated right now. Yeah, something founders are completely ignoring. Maybe Norman first and then Anjali.
I would go with inbound lead qualification. So the reason why I'm saying this is everyone thinks about outreach and everything, but the art of closing a deal is disqualifying early.
Anjali?
I will say brand and storytelling. They're focused so much on optimizing their product and product features, they're completely forgetting how to sell it and how to position it and what the story is.
Yeah, true. For me, I would say it's also cleaning your CRM using it, like all the old contacts that are not that are just sitting there, old deals that are not touched and so on. I think that's something that everyone forgets that you can easily automate. If you had to pick one thing that separates the companies that will successfully implement AI in GTM from those that won't, what is it?
I can go. It is being able to take the risk and try something out and then failing quickly and learning and iterating because a lot of these tools, there's so many AI tools right now. A lot of these tools are going to go away. And I think over the next years, you're going to see a consolidation, right, of the tools. Don't be afraid to try different things in this time. It's a transitional period for everyone on the planet. Nobody is the ultimate expert, right? Everybody is trying and learning and iterating. So don't be afraid to try.
Say the successful ones are people and use case centric versus the bad ones are tool centric.
Yes, and I think the ones that are also approaching it more centralized in a way, so really trying to take the whole company context and put it into the LLMs to actually have a good output and not just throwing tools at the people. So yeah, that's for me. What's the one thing you want every founder to do after this episode?
For me, it is have a very good think about what AI can help you optimize and what you really need human expertise and experience for. I think that's one of the best things that founders could do right now.
I love this. So everyone's asking for AI for certain tasks. Not software, standard processes are completely sufficient. And I agree on the human expertise. You can't replace everything. Otherwise, you will be generic. I went a different direction, Tesha, and we didn't talk about this, but I say the minimum I would like to expect a founder is review your current software stack and decide which tools you don't need anymore or can basically replace. So a good example is, why do you still need, so I ask this myself, and it's not an easy transition, but why do you still need a HubSpot? Why do you still need a Salesforce, at least at a certain company level? There might be, or is there something, some other way of doing things that you have in the past? So there are now enough other recording tools. So why do I need, I love Kickscale, but why do you need it ultimately when you can actually record your calls with Gemini and then ask Gemini to analyze and give the feedback and so on? So I'm not saying that please cancel Kick. I'm an absolute Kickscale junkie because it helps me to understand the behavior, but really question your software stack. There is so much efficiency that you can reap before you reap benefits from outreach, from AI-driven outreach.
All right. Thank you so much. So just to a quick recap, I think we talked a lot about having the strategy first and not picking the tools. Really think about your ICP, your positioning, your messaging, your why before you jump onto implementing tools. There's a lot of use cases that are working in content, in signal-based outreach. Although, yeah, we also are skeptical whether the spray and pray outbound outreach will survive and the whole channel will die at some point. CRM data cleansing, so really actually boring basic stuff first in order to enable AI to actually work on top of your data. Having identifying real use cases, identifying processes in your company that can be enhanced or can be speed up by AI, and bringing the right people on board that are really evangelizing the usage, but that are also senior enough and smart enough to understand, to judge the output and to actually bring their expertise to the table. Also the teams are getting smaller. That's what I also taking away. You cannot probably not build your work in an old fashioned way with like 60 people. You need to be much more strategic about it. All right. Thank you both. And thanks so much for joining us. So where can we find you, Anjali? On LinkedIn, you're quite active. I think it's quite easy to find you. So Norman, also LinkedIn or just our website, b2bpractitioners.com.